Shalom Aleichem, hello, dobry wieczór Państwu. My name is YAAANA Mazurkiewicz-Mejsarosh, and I'm the founder of the Yiddish Arts and Academics Association of North America, based here in San Diego. In the name of the whole team, I would like to welcome everybody to the event and thank you for the participation. We're very happy to have you. So as a Polish woman, I am outraged by the recent almost total ban of abortion that the right-wing government was trying to enforce. And as some of you know, that ban inspired amazing large protests of Polish people. So I'll now share my screen to show you two pictures. So you can see how massive these strikes are. Just for those of you who were too busy with American election to follow these events, and if that's the case, I totally understand. So after 2 weeks of these massive protests that have been the largest since the time of communism, the government finally decided to freeze this ban. So we don't know what will happen, but I hope that the Polish women will continue fighting, because the fight is not necessarily only against the abortion and human rights, but also just against the right-wing government and the almost totalitarian regime that we have there these days, unfortunately. So I would like to start a discussion about this whole issue, the whole issue of the ban of abortion in Poland. But the way we will do it, since we are a Yiddish organization, we will use a Yiddish text. And that is not largely known. So thanks to our amazing guests, Cassedy and Yermiyahu, and we will analyze the text with you. So this translation is a part of this larger project of translating stories of Blume Lempel from Yiddish into English. And if I'm correct, that translation that was done in tandem, Ellen and Yermiyahu, won a few awards. And among these awards were the 2012 Yiddish Book Center Award and the YAAANA Memorial Prize in Yiddish Studies from the Modern Language Association. So let me briefly introduce our guests. Cassedy is a former columnist for the Philadelphia Daily News, a former speechwriter in the Clinton administration, and a renowned author of books, a play, and numerous articles that have been published in prestigious journals. And Yermiyahu Ahron Taub is a poet, writer, and translator. He writes poetry in Yiddish and in English, and he is an author of 6 books of poetry and 2 books of fiction. And I have to mention the Polish connection here. 9 of his Yiddish poems were set to music by Michał Górczyński, and they are now available on CD. And that project is from 2014, right? So thank you very much. And now the floor is yours. I hope you will give us some background information about the author of the story we will read and about the story itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, YAAANA. Thank you everyone for coming. We're delighted to be a part of this special event. So I'm going to speak briefly about the book, well, more specifically about Blume Lempel herself. And then Ellen's going to talk about the story, Der Choiv, the debt, which is kind of what brings us here today. So Ellen and I spent 9 years working on this book, Oedipus from Brooklyn and Other Stories. It came out in 2016 by Mandelviller Press and Dryad Press. And we've continued to speak about Blume Lempel, her life and her writing since that time. We're always excited to find out how people engage with Blume Lempel's texts, with her unique vision. And so we're looking forward to this discussion today. So I'm going to share a screen. Hopefully this will work. Okay. So Blume Lempel was the celebrated writer of poetry and prose. Her 2 poetry collections of short stories, her 2 published collections of short stories were Arega von Emes, which came out in 1981, and Ballada von a Cholam, Ballad of a Dream, which came out in 1986. Arega von Emes means a moment of truth. And you can see the spines on the left and the two TPs, which I kind of combined into a single image on the right. Der Choiv, the debt, which Ellen will be discussing shortly, came out in A Rega von MS. So when Ellen and I first started our project, we knew almost nothing about Blume Lempel, beyond the fact that she'd been born in 1907 in a little town or shtetl called Choroskov or Choroskiv in what was then Galicia, subsequently Poland, and now Ukraine, in what she described as a whitewashed room by the banks of a river that had no name. We wondered, how did she emerge from that whitewashed room to write with such feeling and with so many precise details about settings that range from the old world to cosmopolitan Paris between the wars to New York and California? So we went hunting. We tracked down Blume Lempel's heirs, her relatives, and former colleagues and friends. We found boxes of her personal papers stored in an attic. We went to research libraries. A picture began to emerge. We learned that even though Blume Lempel became a very sophisticated literary artist, she never had much of a formal education. She said, "My father believed that all a girl needed to know was how to cook a pot of food, sew a patch, and milk a cow." So even though her older brother received a formal education, her own schooling was sporadic. In Poland, she said, "I didn't write at all. I only dreamed of writing." But as she dreamed, she stored up details, observations that would later appear in her work. All her life, her childhood self remained accessible to her as the girl whose tides ebb and flow on my sandy shores to this day. For a time, Blume's childhood world seemed safe and secure. But when she was 12, her mother died, her father remarried, and Blume was pressed into service as a housekeeper and nursemaid for him and his new wife and their young child, and they're pictured here with a young Blume. Meanwhile, her brother had been imprisoned for militant communist activity and escaped and fled to France. In 1929, at age 22, Blume also left Khoroskov. Her plan was to become a pioneer in Palestine, but on the way, she stopped off in Paris to visit her brother. She fell in love with the city of light. She abandoned her chalutz, her pioneer plans, and found a job in a factory where she met her husband, Lempel. They started a family. She began writing poems and meeting other Yiddish writers. Blume lived in Paris for 10 years and had every intention of making it her permanent home. But then came Hitler. As World War II began in 1939, the family was extremely fortunate to be able to flee to New York. Here they are a few years after the war. Blume reached out to the New York Yiddish literary scene and began to publish a novel and short stories. Then the news from Europe began to trickle in. She learned that back in her hometown, her father's wife and their young son had been killed by the Nazis, that her father had then set fire to the family home and hanged himself, and that on the day before the liberation of France, her beloved brother who had joined the resistance had been arrested and shot. As she later said, she was catapulted into a deep despair. The past was a graveyard, the future without meaning. Years passed, desolate, hopeless years. She was fortunate to have the support of an illustrious mentor. Ahron was renowned throughout the world of Yiddish letters as a poet, as a rescuer of treasured Jewish texts in the Vilna ghetto during World War II, and as the editor of the leading Yiddish literary journal called Die Goldene Kate, The Golden Chain, which was published in Tel Aviv. Sutzkever and Lempel corresponded for some 20 years. Another editor might have tried to tame Lempel's bold choices, but Sutzkever never did. Instead, he wrote to her, "You have your own words, your own observations, your own madness, which you scoop out from within yourself like shovelfuls of hot coals. And this was just what Blume Lempel needed. Here's a cover of an issue of Die Goldene Kate. Many Yiddish writers, and in fact readers, celebrated Lempel's work. The renowned Yiddish writer Chaim Grada wrote to Blume how sad it was that her talent had flowered so late, at a moment in history when so few could read her words in the original. But perhaps this was inevitable, he said. Lempel belonged to her time and no other. He wrote, "It is enough to make one weep that you appeared in our literature at a time when so few good readers remained. But perhaps it could not have been otherwise. Perhaps your magical, sweet, lyrical tone could not have come into being any earlier than our autumn years. You are a modern writer in the most beautiful sense." Lempel died in 1999 at her home in Long Beach on Long Island, New York. And we are thrilled that new generations are discovering Blume Lempel's work, including the dead, through our translation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, who's going to talk about that story. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Yermiyahu, and thank you to YAAANA for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's very moving to me that the work of Blume Lempel turns out to speak to our present moment. And so I'm really glad to have this time to talk to you about the story, The Debt, Der Choiv. So Yermiyahu and I met in a Yiddish reading group in Washington, D.C. a number of years ago. And when we opened this little gray volume, A Rege von Emes, A Moment of Truth, we were really blown away by what we found. We had never encountered writing like this in any language. Truly unique, experimental, fearless, taboo-defying, and lyrical writing. Here was a bold explorer of new terrain, a dazzling stylist, and a profound teller of truths about the human condition. In nearly every story, the experience of women is front and center. We read about women who are outsiders. We read about divorce, about rape, about homelessness and prostitution. And in the most taboo-defying story of all, the one that we selected as the title for our collection, Oedipus in Brooklyn, we read a story from the point of view of a contemporary Jewish woman who enters into a sexual relationship with her son. And then there's The Debt, which begins with the image of a woman lying strapped to a table in an abortion clinic in pre-war Paris. And it's a shocking image to begin a story with. And after that beginning, we learn the story in pieces through a kind of dreamy and jagged narrative that is very typical of Lempel's work. The main character is a young woman without a name in this story. She's an immigrant living in Paris between the two world wars, just as Blume herself did. We learn that she's poor. She lives in a walk-up in a tiny garret, and she's just lost her job when she receives a letter from her father back home in Poland saying that he is ill and needs money for an operation. It was her father who paid for her to escape the shtetl and come to Paris. So she feels she has to repay her debt to him. And she has a friend, a wealthy, older married man. And on the spur of the moment, it occurs to her to ask him for what she calls a loan to finance her father's operation. And it's not clear whether she intends to repay this loan in exactly the way her so-called friend insists on. Namely, he immediately locks the door, locks her into her apartment, and initiates sex with her. And this is how she has ended up on the table in the abortion clinic. And the story we learn, she's lying on the table, and we go through the abortion with her and come out the other end. And during that, in pieces, the story of what led up to the abortion comes to us. And then we also dip into other parts of her life, and we look around the room at the other women in the clinic. We hear the nurses padding by and offering a drink and this and that. So we're there with her in a very intimate way. And in her writing, every word counts, like in a poem. This is a very short story. It's only about 4 pages, but we learn a great deal. It's very compacted, very dense. And often within just one sentence, you'll find her imagination moving back and forth between dream and reality. We have shifting sunlight and flowing water, and we have beauty mixed with danger. We have a character who is often dissociated from what is going on. She sort of seems to be passive, but she also acts decisively and has dreams for her future. She's not a passive person, in fact. So inside the story of the abortion is the story of a young woman who's taking control of the shape of her own life. In the online Yiddish studies journal In Geweb, which I'm sure many of you know, a woman wrote a review of this story, an analysis of it. She's a reproductive rights activist and writer named Leah Friedman. And she wrote this: "This story feels contemporary precisely because it depicts this taboo subject without resorting to many of the tropes employed frequently even today. Tropes like abortion is traumatic, abortion is dangerous. We're in this clinic seems to be very well run. It seems very safe. It's not a story about the trauma of abortion or the dangers or of being ripped off by some predatory doctor." Leah Friedman continues, "This story is remarkable for the relative ease and safety with which the protagonist obtains the abortion. Dispensing with the cliches, Lempel instead offers a new script for this subject that focuses on specific details, images, and sensations. In an era in which access to safe and legal abortion is beginning to look increasingly out of reach," and Leah Friedman is talking about here in the US, "this story can instruct us in how to write about it. No cliches, just experience." Thank you. Those are my initial remarks.
Thank you very much to both of you. And now I'll share the screen so we can read the story together. As you see, there is Yiddish and there is English in front of us. We'll read it in Yiddish. And for those of you who don't speak Yiddish yet, there is translation available on the screen. So now I would like to ask if there are any volunteers to read the story. And yes, you can maybe write in chat and then we'll decide on the order. Okay, Sasha, so you are first. Adank, thank you.
Okay. Sie ist gelegen auf einem Operatietisch mit den Ponym zum Sulfid. Ihr eberster Teil Körper ist gewinn steif, verpanzert mit plastischen Bändern. Die Knie hat sie gehalten, aufgestellt, die Füße abgedeckt, offen. Sie hat nicht getracht von der vollständigen Sekunde. Die Sphäkes und dem Selbstrachmanes hat sie übergelost in ihr Mansardestiebel, dort, wo sie Sennen zum erst aufgekommen und sich besetzt in ihr. Sie hat sie zerhungen wie anonyme Schure grisslich auf dem jedem Stickel Himmel, was hat sich gespräht wie eine Latte über ihr Dachfenster auf den 6. Stock. Ja? Weiter?
Efter noch ein Teil und später Spencer anders. So maybe one more paragraph and then the next person, okay?
Okay. Auf einem Operatietisch ist sie gewinn ruhig. I mean, perverse Ruhigkeit, was nimmt darum gewisse Menschen, wenn alles etwas für sie verloren. Hinter die Augen decklich hat sie gehalten als Sommerfrühmorgen, was hat sich besetzt auf die Randen von ihr Bewusstsein und nicht der Lust aufzunehmen die Realität.
Dank. Faith, are you good? Faith, you could start, please.
Es ist gewesen frühmorgen an besondere Passierungen. Die Sonne hat nur was der Gerecht dem ersten Gorn von Sacré-Cœur
Sacré-Cœur.
mit welcher goldene Finger gesucht, ein Weg durch die reich zerblätterte Kastanienbäume und angerührt das steinerne Jüngele von wemmens Glied rieselt ein fallendicker Strom. In dem Operatiozimmer seien kein Fenster nito. Das neonliche Licht, Neonlicht strahmt von unmittelbaren Qualen, schlagt sich an in Suffit und niedert herab zum Deal. Das Mädel auf dem Tisch hat die Augen zugemacht. Sie sieht keinen nicht. Sie hört Stimmen, was kommen von einer anderen Welt, mit welcher sie hat kein Scheiches nicht. Sie reden wegen Amateur, was sie will nicht kennen. Schützt sie sich unter der Vision von sommerdicken Frühmorgen, schützt sich lang, euch nachdem, wie die Krankenschwester hat zugelegt, die Äthermaske zu ihr Nase.
Okay, I see on chat that people say the English is not fully visible. So maybe I will just send the link in chat, okay? And everybody can open on their computer.
I don't, it's perfectly clear on mine. Maybe, yeah, it seems perfectly clear.
For me too.
It's clear, but
For
it's
me,
not
it is clear,
lined
but
up.
not lined up.
Oh, not lined up. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, the paragraphs are not necessarily side by side.
Okay, let me.
Because it's not that literal.
I
The
showed.
translator's art there.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Yana, can you make the make more of it visible at once so that
Oh,
that
so
more of the
Yeah.
the English would be visible?
yes, I'll try.
Pictures off, the pictures of us, we can take those off, then you'll be able to see the whole thing.
That's right.
I think this is the main problem. We don't need to see the windows.
Is it better this way?
No.
It's a little smaller. The text is a little smaller, so you should see the.
No,
We
because
still see just half of the body of English text. It's still covered with our windows, with our faces.
You can move your windows.
Okay.
There's no way to see the Yiddish and English at the same time because they're not lined up. Look at
Gotcha.
Zim and Sanksi set. They're not together.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sending you all the
It isn't
link.
your
Oh,
fault.
already.
It's
We
okay.
already have it. We already have it in chat.
It's not Yana's screen.
Yeah.
The Ingeveb website doesn't have it perfectly lined up, so it's just that way.
No, life is not perfect. But Sarah, I see Sarah already shared it with you in chat, so you can open it and then you'll see it perfectly. And if you have any more issues, you can write in chat and we'll try to address them. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so next person, that was Feigl, I think, if I remember.
Feigl, ja.
Ja, dank.
Sie hört die Stimme, was befällt ihr zu zählen. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sie stellt unter das Maul zum Jüngeles Umschuld. Das qualdige Wasser ist kalt. Es gießt sich über ihr Ponym, über ihr Leib. 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. Und das ist der letzte Atemzug tracht sie, ist gut, was hat passiert da. Bei der Statue von Jüngele, gut, was hat passiert in der Früh, eder die Mames mit die Kinder wirklich fielen an dem Square.
Mhm. Dank. Wer noch ist da? Mark, ja? Oh, Sarah, entschuldig. Sarah Miskowitz?
Okay, ich kann gehen.
danke.
Die Krankenschwester bei ihr kopend trägt die Maske zu ihr Ponem. Ihr Hand ist weiblich weich. Mit der rechten Hand hält sie die Maske, mit der linken glätt sie ihr Stirn. Das Mädel auf dem Tisch geht sich unter der Schwesters Kiele Finger. Euch, sie hat alle Jahren gewollt sein, a Krankenschwester, tracht sie. Respirez, mademoiselle, attempt, Freilin, hört sich Emmetsons hypnotische Stimme, 23, der Zimmer schwimmt, die Stimmes trinken sich, sie tauchen auf und gehen unter. Die weißen Wolfsdecken, sie über seinen schwarz und tief. Sie schäumen nicht wie der Jan. Sie stehen vergliedert auf ein Ort. A stagnierte Ozera Fool mit
Chloroform.
Ja. Sie passt Neonlicht sortiert auf der Überfläche Weis an Richtung.
Großen Dank. Thank you so much. Und Mark's turn now.
Sie fühlt die Hand, was dringen herein in ihre intime Äther, glitschen sich wie Fisch herein in ein Reus. Die Ruhe, was beherrscht sie, ist tief wie das Wasser. Wie der Wirbelrad, was dreht sich herum, ein einzigen Gedank. Euch der Gedank ist vernäppelt, rührt nicht an dem ätzem Ich. Die Drama wickelt sich hinter a Vorhang. Auf der Seite von der Szene herrscht totale Ruhe. Die Stimmen, was kommen von der Tief, gehen ihr nicht an. Sie reden wegen Emerson, wenn man sie will, nach Luten nicht kennen. Sie reden wegen dem Mädel, was liegt auf dem Tisch. A Besula und 4 Chadoshim schwanger.
Okay.
Die dosige Wörter, der mahnt sie sich erst in allgemeinem Saal. Sie will davon nicht trachten, kickt sie nach der Krankenschwester, was bewegt sich graziös, mit leichter, flinker Tritt. Die Krankenschwester habt auf ihr Blick. Sie dernentelt sich zu ihr, sie wischt herum ihr Panem, nimmt weg das Schüssel zum Brechen, deckt sie herum. Erst jetzt bemerkt sie, als sie liegt neben am Fenster. Die Ladens sind vermacht. Sie hört dem Regen, sieht die Grue passen Tag. Fegelig ruderen ergens naht. Meine Stamm ist das ein Garten, Bämer, Blumen. Bei der gegenüberdicke Wand brecht a Freu. A Wald mit reuter Haar verstellt ihr Pannen. Ein junger Bacher mit frühzeitig grünem Haar beugt sich über ihr. Helft ihr sich einordnen zurück auf den Kissen, zerspreit ihre Haar wie ein Feuerrad.
After Cindy, it's there. Maybe Cindy can read now.
I'll try.
Dank, Mark.
Die Schwester geht von Bett zu Bett. Ihre Tritte sind rhythmische. Sie wickeln sich herum, Gedanken wie anesthetische Maskes. Sie erweitern das Reale, vernäppeln den Moment. Auf den schochendicken Bettel kämmt sich erfreut die Haar, okay. Kämmt sich erfreut die Haar, okay. Sie guckt in den Spiegel und redet zu nicht deutliche Zuhörer. Und öfter redet sie gar zu ihr. Redet durch den Spiegel, wie durch positiven Moststoff. Ein unzuficker Schnur von Red. Die Schnur wickelt sich herum ihre Mischpoche, ihr Mann, ihre Kinder. Ihr Mann, sagt sie, wer kein mal nicht sagt, Liebe bei Tag und Liebe bei Nacht, es ist ein Koschmar. Ihre Rede legt sich auf ein Mädels Gemüt, wie Reuer ausfällt. Der Eindruck bleibt auf ewig verkühlt. Sie beugt sich herab, hebt auf das Schüssel, brecht aus. Auf dem Tischel bei ihr liegt ein Sägerl. Der, was hat gesollt kommen zu ihr, hat sich verspätigt und öfter wird im Ganzen nicht kommen. Der junge Mann mit die frühzeitig graue Haar kuscht die Hände von der reut gelockten Mädel. Sie ist noch gar ein Junge, öfter 15 und öfter 16. Sie ist ein Gemisch voll verschiedener Rhythmen. Ihr Profil ist scharf gezeichnet, hoher Kinnbacken, das Lempel verrissen, der Stern niedrig, das Mäul klein, offen, voll mit Tränen. Die Frau von schochendicken Bettel packt schon ihre Sachen. Sie ist schon da im Spital zum vierten Mal. Hinteren Puder bricht sich ihr Ponem. Die Linie von ihr Hals ist vergossen mit Fetz. Sie sitzt darauf, die Socken auf ihre bläu oder dicke Füße. Ihr Mann wartet schon auf ihr. Guckt nicht in ihre Seite. Guckt auf dem rothaarigen Mädel.
Well, thank. After Pam it's there. Maybe Pam can read now. Thank
Sure,
you.
yeah. Isi mikane das rothaarige Mädel? Will sie euch viel na Hand auf ihr Stern? Herren a Wort schäpchen in ihr Euer? Will sie soll kommen? Das rothaarige Mädel ist a Französinke. Die Kunst von Liebe ist in ihr Blut. Sie aber ist nicht mehr wie eine Imitation. Gewollt mit noch tun und öfter gar obton am min lahaches sich allein. Wollt sie da gestorben, wollt sich schon als allein verentfernt. Ihr Freund wollt geschrieben zu ihr Taten, als sie so umgekommen, umgekommen in einen Unglücksfall. Und öfter wollte das euch nicht getan. Noch allem ist doch ein Fremder. Das rothaarige Mädel kuscht ihr Geliebtens Hand. Sie hält sein Blonje bei ihrer Lippen und deckt sie zu mit beiden Händen. Ergens zwischen dem rothaarigen Mädel und der verpuderte Dame steht sie. Nein, sie steht nicht. Sie flieht. Erotische Winden kehren ihr Luftschiff. Wird sie noch beschollen landen? Wird sie noch stehen bleiben mit den Füßen auf der Erde? Weiter? Okay. In der Mansarder Stiebel auf dem 6. Stock tunkelt schon eine Wade. Die graue Himmellatte wird bisslich weiß abgewischt. Sie wird liegen auf dem Bett. Die graue Wände werden grauer, enger. Sie wird zählen die Tritt auf die nackte Treppe. Wird sich Emetzer abstellen bei ihr Tier? Weiter? Okay.
After noch ein und später will ich gucken.
Ja. Okay, all right. Okay. Will ich Tage soll kommen? Was habe ich ihm zu sagen? Was will ich von ihm hören? Absolut, 4 Chadoshim schwanger. Nein, sie wird ihm das nicht erzählen. Sie kann viele von dem nicht trachten. Hat bezahlt für dem Vergnügen. Der Cheshben ist untergezogen. Bezahlt, verendigt.
Dank. After Yeshai Avram was also wanted to read.
Ja, ich bin da. Wie schnell das hat passiert, fragt sie. Eine Operation und kein Geld ist nicht da. Noch als ist sie dem Taten schuldig, a Chäuf. Hat verkauft sein Teil von der Jerusha zu decken ihrer Reise hat so es kein Paris. Emes, hat sich der Mord geklieben, Chasnet zu haben und gewollt, was Gecher Potter werden von seiner erwachsener Tochter. Auch sie hat gewollt, was weiter weg von dem neuen Vorvolk. Der Brief ist wie ein Schloss, was verhackt dem Ring. Ein psychologischer Ring, von welchen sie kann sich nicht befreien und öfter will sie sich nicht befreien. Ich nötig sich in eine Halboa, hat sie gesagt, zu ihr Beweibten, Bejorten, Reichen und untermittellichen Bewunderer. Die Idee ist zu ihr gekommen, Gericht. Sie hat herausgesagt, die Wörter, wie sie wollten gekommen, nicht von ihr, nur von Claudette oder Simons Weltbanem. Wie viel darfst du, hat gefragt. 5.000 Frank. Das als? Ja, so viel darf kosten mein Vaters Operatia. Du bist ein Kind, sagt das ist nicht genug. Bis redt, verschließt die Tür von innen wenig, verlässt dem Lamp, sie sieht nicht sein Pornem, sie hört sein Stimme, heiß zu dringlich, Krippewarte. Sie tragt von ihr Taten, und öfter tragt sie in Ganzen nicht. Sie macht zu die Augen, wie schnell das alles ist geschehen, a doppelte Operation dem Tatens und der Tochters. Und die Mama in Kever liegt, a doppelt verschämte. Gedankenläufen. Caitlin sich eine in anderen. Sie dremmelt ein und weckt sich über das schöne Bett in, ist schon vernommen von einer anderen Patientke. A Krankenschwester dreht sie zu der Operation. Das rot gelockte Mädel mit einem perfekten Profil von Ingers Odolisk feilt sich die Nägel. Sie schmeichelt zum ledigen Benkel, was hat nur was verlost.
Adan, אפשר Carol, it's there. Thank you, maybe Carol.
Moment, okay. Durch verhackte Loddens spart neuer Tag. Erst jetzt fehlt sie dem Weitig in Brich. Der Weitig ist scharf wie 1000 Kalibrium. Wollten gebissen ihrer Gedärm. Das Leib brennt. Sie sorgt sich zu nehmen, aber Betäubungsgefühl. Die Krankenschwester guckt sie an mit Einsehen nicht. Kann ihr euch bringen Limonade, cover Tee? Nein, sie will gar nicht. Sie will vielen dem Weitig bis in Bein. Sie will ausbringen das Wildfleisch, abschälen die Maske, der kennen sich allein. Auf der grüne Lonke von ihr Jugend, okay. Setzt sie das Mädel. Sie spielt sich in Scherblich. Sie hat noch was gefunden, wunderscherbel entdeckt fantastischer Welt. Welt von Rot und Grün und Blau. Beitchen Krellen, grüne Perl, die Kopfwerfer glitt wie sieben Sonnen. Die Trainer Eufen weg seinen goldene mit Berres.
Dank. Efter ist der Feigl? Entschuldig.
Ja.
Dank.
Das blonde Schägetzel von jener Seite stellt ihr unter ein Fessel. Reißt heraus das Scherbel von ihrer Hand. Das Mädel weint. Das Mädel in ihr weint noch jetzt, weint noch alt. Das Säuberscherbel hat das Schägetzel zerbrochen, mit die Fies zertrotten. Ist noch möglich für mir zu werden Krankenschwester? Fragt sie mit der schwachen Kohl. Gewiss, entfällt die Krankenschwester. Noch 2 Jahre studieren in das Schüssel zum Brechen in ganzen Eiers mit alle Zugaben dazu. Sie dreht sich heraus zu der Wand. Das Mädel auf jene weißer, grüner Lonke wäscht sich die Augen. Sie guckt, tracht und tremmelt ein.
Okay, a großen Dank alle. Sehr schön. Thank you so much. I'm very happy that we had so many volunteers. And now we can discuss the text if you're willing.
Can I say one thing first?
Sure.
Wonderful translation. I mean, really good. I mean, it gets it all without being literal and stilted, right? It just reads lovely in both languages. Really nice.
Oh, thanks. So do we have any other comments? I think that the way, like, I know from Polish literature that going to Paris for an abortion is one of the things that people would do. There are 2 choices. Either you go to Paris and you have a experience that is medically relatively safe, or you go, cheaper route. But I'm kind of happy we didn't read the story about, the alternative, because I guess we all know these stories. So
I'd just like to say that the problem isn't just in Poland these days. I'm living in Louisiana, where the night before last, a constitutional amendment was passed, basically identical to what was passed in Poland, and for the identical same motivations and the identical same ideologies promoting it. And the argument that I make with my neighbors in Louisiana and my interlocutors on Facebook is, when you pass these kinds of laws, you don't prevent a single abortion. All you ensure is that rich people will travel to have abortions and poor people will die under horrific, unsanitary conditions. So anybody who's saying that these bans are promoting life doesn't really know the definition of the term. they never have an argument against me when I say that.
They're not pro-life. They are in favor of the death penalty also. I have a question about one of the details, if anyone happens to know. It's not really relevant. But she describes the statue of the little boy peeing. That statue is not in Paris. Is there a copy of it in Paris?
Yeah, the boy peeing at Brussels, right?
That's yeah.
I was also thinking about it.
That was very peculiar, unless there's a copy of the thing.
What?
So you're saying the whole story is a lie?
It's just, you know, dreaming and fantasizing and letting your mind wander under the ether. And so, you know, I wouldn't be too.
So she brings a statue from Brussels into her Parisian.
Are you saying there's only one statue of a boy peeing in the entire world?
Well, that's what I wonder. That's exactly what I wonder.
I am sure there are lots of statues of boys peeing. That's a very widely seen trope. I mean,
I've been modeling for that statue for years now.
No, again, it's like was said before. It's very non-judgmental. You have all sorts of different people, young women, older women, women who've also obviously used the abortion clinic as a way of contraception because they're there time and time again, married, and they seem to be treated well. And it does surprise me that this is the way it was, or we should believe that this was the way it was when in the 30s. Yeah, was it the 30s or something?
30s, I would guess.
Yeah.
It has all the casual atmosphere of a dentist's office.
Right. Now, in the review that Leah Friedman wrote, she seems to have done some research about this, and she said that abortion was actually illegal in Paris then, had been made illegal after World War I. But that didn't keep the conditions in this clinic from being pretty good.
Well, it probably cost, quite a bit.
Right. Cost that healthy man, that so-called friend.
Yeah.
Freigel wanted to say something for a while, so please speak up.
Yeah, it's hard to jump in without one speaker at a time. But yeah, what struck me about the story was all the contrast between like the relative feeling of peace and safety in the clinic and the really traumatic things that she goes through, including rape. And also the sort of layers of what's happening for her, like her being kind of in a dreamlike state because of anesthetic, but also like a dissociative response to trauma is like, can also very much be read in there. So there's sort of all these like contrasts. And if I could just share a little bit about the situation of abortion in Canada, like a country where abortion is free and legal everywhere is not somewhere where people who need it can actually very easily access it everywhere, even though it says that on paper. Like I live in a big city in Toronto that has 8 abortion clinics, and people can like easily like schedule one for the next day if they need it. But you live somewhere like far out in the country where, and they do your intake and your actual procedure like on the spot. But you live somewhere way out in the country where people have more conservative views, even though it's like legal and free everywhere. Like they make you come for an intake, they make you come back for like maybe like 2-3 appointments total, and the nurses running it like really try to dissuade people, even though like, you know, it's supposed to be a service that is available to anyone who needs it. So the conditions aren't necessarily like sketchy or unsafe, but if people don't have access to transportation and they need to go 3 times to get this service, like that is a barrier for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm seeing if I see Yeshaya Avram, did you raised your hand, but I'm not sure if you wanted to say something or you were just stretching.
Well, I was probably stretching. There's probably something else I need to say. People seem to think that all religious people are against abortion, but the Jewish religion seems to have a lot of views on the matter, ranging from, and there's really no belief that the human, in Judaism, that in the Jewish religion, that human life begins at conception, even though there are some people who are strict, some rabbis, especially Orthodox, who are stricter about abortion than others. So it's kind of a
Well, that's
violation
right.
of our religious freedom to impose an anti-abortion rule.
Yes, well, in Poland, the case was about the children who, you know, that they will be born with some severe illnesses. That was the main problem. And I think that struck the whole controversy. Because I looked actually at the numbers. So the last year, from the legal abortions, there were 1,100 legal abortions performed in Poland, and 1,074 were resulted from fetal abnormalities. So a huge number of them. And this is what the government is focusing on right now, that the sick children should be born nevertheless, even if there is, you know, once they are born, there is nothing, there are no services that the government could provide for these sick children. So I think that's the main problem. There are, maybe people from Poland could speak up here and tell us more about this, because I haven't been there since 2016, so I don't have the freshest information on the topic.
Actually, YAAANA, the law in Poland changed in '96, first time, and this would really almost ban the abortion in Poland. There was only 3 cases that you could get abortion in Poland. It was the problem with the fetus, rape, or the danger for mother health.
Right.
So now this situation, actually the government broke the social agreement, and it opened discussion for human rights and abortion rights as a total. And thank you, I think, Ishram, a man that talked about the place for abortion in Judaism. Actually, I had a very big talk with a kosher religious gynecologist in Israel, and I were looking into situation of women in Israel, especially religious women. And there is like quite a big theology a background that describing when the body is developed enough to soul be able to enter in the body. There is a possibility for a woman, religious woman, to stand before Rabbanut and explain her situation, any situation like not having a partner or having too many children, and it's in any way endangering quality life of the family. The abortion is not only legal, but it's kosher. And we just read horrible, actually, description of the situation, but we have to remind ourselves that this is situation from the beginning of the century. We live in 2020. Most of abortions are done in the first trimester by chemical peel. Most of women can go through it at home. It's just a bigger period, in fact. So scaring women with that act of self-defying and caring for their own family, it's quite brutal for today's world, but also 100 years ago, I feel there was more access to planning of the family that it's today in Poland. And shortly also, I will add that this last 20 years in Poland, where actually abortion is illegal for most of cases, we are talking about unwanted generation, children that were born not from love, not from parents that wanted them, but children that grew up on streets, sometimes in all kind of groups. And we see fascism in Poland for the first time in the history of Poland, really, organized fascism that using Catholic religion to legitimize their existence. And in my opinion, this is that lost generation that grew up in orphanage houses, run mostly in Poland by Catholic Church, and very big pathology that we talk about, pedophilia in Polish church. We talk about abuse by Polish nuns. Those are documented stories, and only some we know today. So it have very big, deep wrinkle in the society. And I think that this would happen, open talk about human rights in Poland, also LGBT community, because this lately in Poland also been quite a problematic subject, talking about people as ideology. This never can end. So I just want to say, yeah, the politicians open actually door for young people in Poland, not only women, but also young men, to really question the country policy that lie not in separation from fundamentalist Christianity, which is not really even traditional to Poland. So
in some way it is, but the level, so what, it's an extreme level of, and I thought like it, I think it's against religion too, because in religion, in Catholic religion, there is a notion of free will, which I don't see any free will in the current political setup. So I think it's against religion too, if you follow it closely.
Anything that it's against free will is against religion. This is what was giving us what make a differentiation between us and angels, actually. Whoever going to make changes in our free choices can also be viewed as somebody who work against God's will and religion.
Right. Okay, Stella, you wanted to say something?
So I'm not religious, but the like study of religion really interests me because especially across the world, religion is very prominent in like laws and how we do things in countries, especially like whatever the dominant religion is in whatever country or area that you're living in, that tends to rule over your life, even if you're not a part of that religion, because it's kind of the common understanding or like morality code that people think that they want to live by. And I think that that's sad, though, that we oftentimes think that people that are not a part of our religion or people that are not religious don't have any morals, or they don't have any morals and they don't have any set of standards that they hold themselves to. Because even my grandmother, who is very Christian, both my grandparents are, and they both have told me like they refer to Christians as good Christians. And I was like, what, versus the bad atheists? And I kind of laughed. And she was like, well, we have a set of moral standards. And I'm like, do you not think I do? And she just explained it to me. She was like, it's hard for me to understand how you can have any sort of morals without a God. And that really opened my eyes at a very young age to be like, wow, like people actually believe that. And then I asked her about people of other religions too. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not religious, but how about someone who is religious, but just a different religion from you? So even some other part of Catholicism or Judaism or Hinduism, or Islam or Buddhism. And she was like, well, that's a different set of morals that I'm not necessarily aligned with. So it was just this interesting, it made me think about it. And now going forward and growing up and becoming of the age that I do have consent over my own body and things under the law, it really makes me, it's very interesting. For instance, I live in Washington State in the United States, and we, under the abortion laws here, you can get an abortion at any age without parental consent. Like your parents do not have to do, like you can get an abortion without your parents knowing or signing off. That's not the case in most states. It just happens that Washington is a very liberal state and a very non-religious state. It's one of the least religious states in the United States. So it's interesting to see how the places that are the least religious and the least Catholic and Christian for the most part in the United States are very the states that have the most like liberal and like easy to access abortion laws. Like the West Coast in particular has it's way more easier. And there's really a lot of good movies that rarely, sometimes always, I think, like came out recently, and that's a movie about this girl who travels from Pennsylvania to New York to get an abortion because in Pennsylvania, because she's 17 and in Pennsylvania you have to get parental consent. And that's an issue that I really have, and I know a lot of places in Europe have that as well. I was researching like abortion laws in Germany because I'm writing a novel that takes place in the DDR, and I was looking into like what kind of abortion laws that they had there and like how the Soviets treated like abortion and reproductive rights. And I think it's sad that you have to be of a certain age to have consent over your own body. And I think it's sad that in a lot of places, if I needed an abortion or needed any sort of reproductive health care, I would have to have my parents sign off on it. And luckily I have very supportive, lovely parents, but I couldn't imagine if I didn't, or if I had parents that were very supportive but were religious and it went against their religion, but I didn't believe that it went against my religion or whatever. And I think that's part of religious freedom is being able to believe what you want to believe, but not let it affect other people's lives. So like, it's okay if it's more than all right if abortion goes against your personal beliefs within your religion. That's like totally your right, but then you can't tell other people that because of your religion, they can't do something, if that makes sense, you know?
Right.
So I think that's just, it's sad that people think that their religion has to work for everyone, whereas like the entire movement of pro-choice is that you have the right to not have an abortion as well. Like no one is saying that you have to have an abortion ever. Like it's the last thing that anyone wants to do. It's not fun. Like it cracks me up when people act as if everyone just wants to go out and have an abortion because it's super fun. Like it's really like no one thinks that. And so many like media outlets and stuff pretend like, oh yeah, if we legalize abortion everywhere, then just women will be going out and getting abortions willy-nilly. And it's like, that's not going to be the case. Like no one wants to have an abortion. So anyway, sorry, that's my little like rant about that. So yeah, and I noticed that things are coming under scrutiny in the United States as well. And it's just like, it's sad. It's like there's this whole wave right now of sort of anti-abortion movements going on, trying to like, in the United States, even with having a conservative leaning Supreme Court, now people trying to overturn Roe v. Wade and stuff. And it's like, that has set the precedent for so many countries, like abortion laws and stuff, that I can't imagine something that's been 50 years old now having to be overturned just because of a select group of very conservative white men at the top saying what everyone else in the country can do with their bodies and their lives. It's scary and frustrating and infuriating all at the same time. And I really I was really like enjoying hearing that story, and like I don't know Yiddish, but like reading along with you guys was very
cool.
So thank you for having me.
I hope it was easy enough to follow in case people do not speak Yiddish. And yes,
English translation seemed pretty good. I mean, I got what the story was about, so.
Perfect. I'm happy to hear that. Yes, and I see Mark put in chat this recommendation for a Romanian movie about abortion. First of all, I have to say Romanian movies are fantastic. I don't know if you know at all Romanian cinematography. They are top notch. And he recommended this movie about abortion from the Ceausescu times. It's really worth watching. I agree with you, Mark, on that. I watched it 5 times, I think. And I would recommend to everybody to watch it. But in the story, I think they make a point to say that it was past 4 months, right? The abortion took place after 4 months, because that's also a period in which some countries and some laws would not allow abortion because it's too late. It's already quite late in pregnancy to the 4 months. So I think it's a meaningful thing in the text. They mention it explicitly, how long the woman was pregnant, because it's not quick. I think maybe it also took her a while to arrange this abortion, because 4 months is a long time, right?
And you can't have an abortion between the 13th and the 15th week. for medical issues. And if I could explain something that what had mentioned about women using abortion for contraception, that has really not been researched out, if that's not true. I've been a nurse for over 50 years, and I have background in this area, and it happens. Yes, it does happen, but it's rare. With the fact that we have contraception, people, things happen, life goes on, people get raped, but in general, usually those people have some sort of psychological issues. So I just wanted to throw that out to you.
I also just wanted to bring up a general point when we're talking about abortion, just like the gendered language, that it's not just women who get abortions, but non-binary people and trans men and people of any gender can have a body that can get pregnant and need an abortion. So
thank you. I was gonna add that. Thank you. That's very important too. I see all the time people saying like women need access to their own bodies, which is so true. But like people just in general, anyone needs access to their own body, regardless of your gender identity.
We hear some TV somewhere. I don't know if somebody could mute themselves. Oh, I can still try to. Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you very much. Do we have more comments or thoughts about the subject?
Yeah, in the UK, the limit is 24 weeks. Yeah, you can have it up to 24 weeks. You could have it after 24 weeks under certain limited circumstances.
Yeah. That's right.
I think there is a
Yes,
really good description of that situation, that the abortion should be as soon as possible and as far as it's needed. Because we have to remember that some difficulties with pregnancy, especially when we're talking about development of the child, it can be obvious only after the first trimester. So this is, I think, the most just talking about it. It's every situation is very personal, and in a time of personalized medicine, I think we should leave some understanding that it's not just numbers.
Hang on a minute,
Okay, Jay, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for, can you hear me? I have a question for the Ellen and Yermiyahu. When you translate, is your goal or focus on the writer, the reader, the text, all three? Which? And talk about some of your choices in this wonderful translation.
Ellen, do you want to start?
Well, it is all three. I think in the case of Blume, both Yermiyahu and I came to feel very close to her and really immersed ourselves in her personality and her imagery, which comes up, it gets repeated in many stories, and her, we really got involved in thinking about the kind of narrative choices she was making, or the sort of very disrupted narrative that she tends to use in her writing. We also read a lot of letters and things she'd written about herself as a writer. So we were definitely thinking about her as a writer. As far as the thinking about the original text versus the reader, I always feel that my loyalty has to be to the English language readers, and if that means that you sort of let go of the Yiddish text a little bit, that's to be encouraged. That staying very close to the actual text and word by word is really not what translation is about. So I always feel like, there's also, sometimes I know a translator who actually takes the Yiddish text or the original text and puts it in another room to just emphasize, okay, that phase is over and now we're in English land. And that's where we have to stay. And that's what we really have to be doing. But that said, you know, I love Yiddish and I love English. I was brought up to love English and to love playing with words and working with words. But, you know, Yiddish is also a kind of home for me. So, so it's all of those things. What would you say?
Okay, thank you.
Fellow translator.
Yes, just to add, so yeah, I mean, I share a lot of those things. I think I sometimes pushed for the Yiddish side of things, but in the end, I completely agree with Ellen. The English has to stand on its own as a complete thing. And in subsequent projects, you know, there are moments when you do like the side by side, and then after a while, like I like to take some time away and then just look at the English and see if it stands as a coherent English text that I don't want to say expunged the Yiddish, but that it works as English and there aren't these sort of linguistic traces like, you know, sollen, ich will, als du sollst, which is very common in Yiddish, or even like schein, you know, ich hab schein etwas getan. And, you know, those two things are very common in Yiddish. And do you need, you know, in English, you wouldn't use sollen, and that, you know, you wouldn't use should quite that way. And then you often don't need already in English because it's kind of there. It's kind of unnecessary. It feels like, you know, I mean, the thing about Yiddish that, I mean, I could go on about this, but the thing about Yiddish, one of the hardest things about Yiddish translation is that you have the same word that has so many different meanings. So, you know, shul can be school or synagogue, or, you know, melamed could be tutor or teacher. Fachela can be a shawl or it can be a kerchief. Those are very different. The word edel can mean refined, noble, polite, courteous, delicate, and fragile. I mean, and, you know, you can say, well, you know, you have to tell by the context and, you know, you need to immerse yourself. But, you know, the context can be like 130 years ago. And so you're sort of assuming you know the context. So, I mean, those are one of the, you know, that's just some of the things that just popped into my head.
Reading the story, I was having this experience of sort of toggling back and forth between the Yiddish text and the English text. And when I was looking at the English text, I kept thinking, interesting choice. That's interesting what they did there.
Can I just say, like, I noticed in this reading that Basula, we did two different ways. We did young girl, and then later on, we did virgin. And so I'm sure, I'm sure we had like long discussions about that.
And just have these just knockdown, drag out fights about different words and different sentences, and should we really say it this way, and so on. So the process of working together as translators was very rich, very rewarding. I was trying to remember who had the first crack at this story, and I couldn't remember. I don't know if you could.
No, I mean, the thing that's so nice that's working in collaboration with a fellow translator is that you have someone who has your back, and you can bounce ideas off them, and, you know, they come up with an idea, and it's like, oh, I should have thought of that. You know, it's just, it's so, I mean, there's so many ways that a sentence can go wrong. You know, there's so many ways. There's so many ways to say something.
Sentence can go right. So
exactly.
I really appreciate your answer about translation, and I think it at least reinforces my feeling, which is that every translation is an interpretation, and you have to create a text, whether you want to or not, that can stand on its own. And what you've done here and with the Yenta Mash is just amazing in what you've produced as a team. So I want to hear what your next project together is.
Well, Yenta was Ellen alone, so I'm going to leave Ellen to
okay.
talk about that.
Sorry. Okay.
Ellen?
Yeah, you know, Yermiyahu is the person who told me something I'm constantly repeating, which is that every act of writing is an act of interpretation, not just translation, but both of us are writers, and it seems so true to me that what you put down on the page is really a translation or an interpretation of what's going on inside your head, and you never get it exactly. You know, it's always, there's so many different ways to do it. So that keeps me going as a translator. Yermiyahu, do you want to talk about
Well, just to say, I know you want to talk about Yenta Mash, but just to say that Blume Lempel's, there's something that's so crystalline and sort of sharp about her writing. I don't know if, even for those of you who didn't know the Yiddish, just the sounds, the elegance, the phrasing, it's such beautiful language. And just the effortless way, like, the statue of the boy pissing to, Angres, Odalisque, she has, the Claudette and Simone, like she just throws in these things and they just lend such a richness and such a beauty. And there's a kind of, there's kind of shimmering quality, even as it's also like so sharp and so precise, that you don't ever quite fully get lost in the liquidity, the liquidness of it, because she reins you back. Like if you think, oh, I love that image, I'm just going to go with that image, she brings you back to the the abortion table and the hard realities that the young protagonist is facing. So yeah, just some thoughts about that.
Yeah, we sometimes use the analogy of collaging or mosaic work for her, because it's like she sort of puts, well, here's a little dab of this, and here's just a little shimmer of that, and you're always a little bit off balance, and you think, where am I going? Which is so appropriate for this particular story, where she's in a strange city, she's under anesthesia. She's just lost her job. What's going to happen next? What kind of woman is she going to be? Where does she belong? And all that. So we feel that Blume's literary style really reflects the kind of a lot of the displacement and disruption in her own life, and kind of makes that so real. And she's a voice for people who have been through experiences of enormous disruption and catastrophe. She was not a survivor of the Holocaust, but she was so deeply touched by it and kind of traumatized by it. And she writes about characters who are living through various kinds of traumas. And generally, her narrative style is a kind of traumatized style as well. Just a word about Yenta Mash, M-A-S-H. After Yermiyahu and I did this project together, I was a translation fellow at the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts. And for that, my project was to translate stories by this writer, Yenta Mash, who grew up in what is now Moldova, then Bessarabia. And she was sent to Siberia as a young woman by the Soviet Union right on the brink of World War II, and was there for 7 years, lived through the war there, and then even after the war was not released from the Gulag until years later. She eventually moved to Israel, and only then in her 50s did she begin to write and to publish. And her stories, her style is very different from Blume's, much more precise and down to earth. and realistic. She doesn't have this surrealist stuff going on, but very interesting and reveals a lot about a period of history where there was, again, a lot of disruption and displacement. And I find myself during this period that we're in thinking about both of these writers quite a bit and finding them strangely consoling. She writes about, both of these writers write about women who are sort of buffeted by the winds of change, but remain true to themselves and have very piquant personalities and somehow get through these terrible things that human beings have to get through. So I recommend that. That book is called On the Landing by Yenta Amash.
Great, thank you. Maybe Ahron and Yermiyahu, could you put links to your books in the chat so people could, if people are interested in obtaining
I'll put
them?
my website, which has all of my things.
Okay. Yeah,
that might be helpful. Great, thank you. Thank you all very much for coming. If you have any other questions, you can also email us. And I would like to also announce that if some of you, as I mentioned, do not speak Yiddish or would like to improve their Yiddish, we will have an intensive winter course coming up in December, because it's time to offer Zoom winter courses. That's the next fashion, I guess, in the Yiddish world. So I will also post a link to that one in chat. And we also try to Yiddishize children. So if you know of any children whose parents are dying for the kids to speak Yiddish, send them our way, because we want to produce the next generation of native Yiddish speakers, if possible. It would be lovely to, and it will help the language to survive, as we all know. So I'm putting our email address and our website for the reference in the chat. Großen Dank, Allemen. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful that our special guests could have joined us, and we hope to collaborate in the future as well. Großen Dank. Thank you.